Good midnight, night owls. You're listening to Midnight FM, where stories breathe when the world gets quiet. Tonight, Grandpa Mr. Joseph brings us a tale from far out in the fields, where rain has a memory and the earth keeps its own books. He calls it the Harvest Children. Grandpa, the mic is yours.
Good midnight, Jacob, and good midnight to everyone listening with their lamps turned low. If you hear something moving while I speak, don't worry. That's only the ground adjusting. The earth does that when it remembers. I come from a place called Harrowside, a village shaped like a handful of seeds thrown into wind and told to become families. We had a one-room school with a bell that lost its voice every winter, and a church that smelled of damp wood and borrowed coats. We had a river, too, thin, kind, always ready to forgive mistakes we made upstream. Then one year, the sky forgot us. Drought isn't only dryness, it's a kind of silence. The river turned into a dark line like a pencil mark a child forgot to erase. Wells coughed up air and apologies. When you wake up and the air tastes like old boards, you start to understand that whatever lives under your feet has stopped listening. The elders met in the schoolhouse. I remember the chalk dust floating like tired snow, and men rubbing their beards as if wisdom hid under there if you warmed it enough. The oldest among us, Sarala, came in with her cane that tapped like a metronome. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't ask permission. She said, "We made a promise when the first hunger came. The earth kept it. We forgot." People shifted, the way benches shift when they're thinking. Sarala told us about the Harvest Pact, a vow our great-grandparents swore by lantern light when the sky last turned its back. Every 7th season, we return one of our own to the earth, and the earth returns rain. The words sounded like rope, ugly, necessary, built to hold. Some laughed, soft and cruel, the way fear can be. But hunger makes even blasphemy sound sensible. That night lanterns moved through our lanes like patient stars, and we walked into the fields that had stopped speaking to us. At the keeping place, a low mound guarded by a scarecrow wearing a shirt with someone's name still stitched inside, we drew a circle in the dust. Sarala chose 2 children, a boy with a copper ring on his wrist, and a girl whose braid looked like rope, strong enough to lower a bucket into a dry well and somehow bring up water anyway. No knives, no graves. The old words never said kill. They said return. We laid the children down and covered them with husks, dry leaves that whisper when frightened, and we sang a lullaby that had rocked the dying and the born without caring which way the soul was going. At dawn, the husks were empty. In their place lay 2 small roots, pale and curved, like commas. Sarala lifted them in her palms and breathed on them as if that was a kind of prayer. "Kept," she said. By noon, the sky remembered us. Rain came like a scolded parent, quick and ashamed, and the fields rose green so fast it made your eyes water to watch. That year you could smell sweetness in the soil. The river forgave us. People stopped looking at the sky and started looking at each other again. After that, every seventh season, when the wind felt mean and the ground throbbed with thirst like a tongue bitten hard, the village returned one to the keeping place. We told ourselves it wasn't death, it was a loan. We told ourselves careful lies you can only tell when they're shared by everyone at the same time. The second time, I was a long-legged boy, built of elbows and questions. I followed old Nayland down to the ditch at the edge of the field. He was digging the kind of hole you dig when you're telling the ground a secret. He had a cloth bundle in his arms. "What are you burying?" I asked. He said names, not looking up. He spoke like a man explaining something to a stubborn horse. He slid the bundle into the dirt. Papers, I realized, sheets covered in handwriting. Names of the living and names of the dead and names of the not yet. He patted the soil down with a gentleness he'd never shown any person, then wiped his hands on his trousers and walked away, lighter by something a man should not be lightened by. That year the rains came twice. The bins bulged. The field hands tore jokes about greedy clouds. The keeping place grew a waist-high ring of green where nothing had grown before. And nobody noticed that when we whispered thanks over supper, the thanks sounded more like relief than gratitude. The next harvest, the pact changed its coat. No circle, no lullaby, no old words. Children simply began to vanish. They left their sandals by the door, neatly paired, because the earth is well-mannered, you understand. It keeps polite habits even in hunger. Little footprints led from doorways into the fields, and then stopped in the rows where the soil stays softer longer than it should. We lifted husks. We pried at the ground with fingers and prayers. We found nothing, no bodies, only threads of root laid on top of the soil sometimes, the way a hair will lie on your pillow a day after the head that owned it has moved on.
Rumors began the way rumors always begin, with someone who's too tired to hold a fear alone. A woman said she heard singing under her floorboards in a voice too small for the world. Another swore the scarecrow moved closer each morning, not by steps, but by remembering where it wanted to stand. A fisherman who'd lost a son stood by the river all night with a lamp and said he saw bubbles rising in a place that hadn't held water since the first famine. Sarala died that winter. The pact kept breathing without her. That's what pacts do. They learn the shape of a village's mouth and speak by themselves. I ran. Not away, just onward, the way young men do when they can't live next to their ghosts. I worked mills that coughed red sawdust into my lungs, and fields that wore different names but kept the same rules. Everywhere I went, the earth felt the same underfoot, as if the world had one long body and we were all walking on the same spine. Years grew over me. My shadow stretched and then began to shrink. When my hair turned the color of old rope, I went back to Harrowside, because a man eventually returns to see whether the hole he left behind kept its shape. The Scarecrow's shirt had become a memory about a shirt. The keeping place had slouched, as if the ground were tired of pretending it didn't know where things had gone. I found prints in the dust between rows, small, neat, neither fresh nor old, the kind of prints a memory leaves when it's feeling bold. I found the ditch where old Nandlin had spread the debt and put my ear to the soil out of habit. The frogs were back, bragging like old men. That should have comforted me. It didn't, because I heard something beneath the frogs. A spoon tapping the inside of a jar. Not loud, patient, the kind of tapping children do when the last sweetness clings to a place their fingers cannot reach. I dug. Foolish, yes. Fast, certainly. The dirt was damp as an old mouth. 3 inches down, I found a glass jar stoppered with wax. Inside lay milk teeth, small and perfect, a twist of red thread and a strip of copper wire tied like a bracelet. I put it back. Some things want light so badly that if you give them a little, they think you promised more. On my way out, I noticed something that had always been true and I had never seen. The Scarecrow's cross wasn't 2 boards. It was 3. The post had an extra foot. That shadow reached farther than it should have, even with the sun obedient behind me. Shadows are like agreements. They shouldn't go where light doesn't ask them to.
That brings us to now. The rains have returned too early, heavy and embarrassed, the way a drunk returns to a conversation they spoiled and tries to pay for everything. The fields are so fat they lean, the roots swell like knuckles under the skin, and 4 children have gone missing this week, including a boy tall enough to argue with his father and short enough to still ask when instead of why. Their sandals sit by their doors, paired neatly, patient as good manners. There are no elders anymore, only men wearing their fathers' jackets and hoping the cuffs make their hands look like they know what to do. They came to me yesterday and said, "Grandpa, speak." I told them I'm only a voice that remembers how other voices sounded. They said, "Then remember out loud." So I am speaking. To you, Jacob, to whoever presses their ear to the radio the way we used to press it to the earth, and to the earth herself, who hears better than any of us. Tonight, I will go to the keeping place. I will bring a blade that has cut rope and memory in equal measures. I will draw the old circle, not because I believe in it, but because circles make even fear feel contained for a moment. I will sing the lullaby I hate and lay husks on the ground to see if anything underneath still breathes. And then
I will ask the earth the question I have never had the courage to ask when the sun could watch me. What did we return, and what is returning to us? Hush now. Listen with me. Do you hear it through your speaker, the soft scraping under my chair? A careful, steady tapping like a spoon on glass? That isn't my boots. That's the floor remembering the jar old Nayland fed all those names into. Only this time, the tapping isn't asking for sweetness. This time, the tapping is answering. I didn't sleep that night. The sound under the floor wouldn't stop. Soft, steady, like fingers brushing wood. You ever hear soil move, Jacob? Not when it's wet or when you dig it, but when it moves by itself. It's like breathing through teeth, slow, careful, alive. When the clock hit midnight, I lit my lantern and started for the keeping place. The rain had stopped an hour before, but the smell of wet earth followed me like someone walking close behind. The fields were swollen, the kind of dark that eats your light no matter how bright it burns. Every stalk of corn leaned heavy, dripping. It sounded like whispering when the wind touched it. Hundreds of small voices gossiping about who might be next. The scarecrow was waiting at the mound. It wore a new shirt, one that hadn't been there the day before. Blue cotton, still smelling faintly of soap. Someone had dressed it recently. And in the glow of the lantern, I swear I saw the fabric breathe. I drew the circle the way Sarala used to. My knife slipped twice. The ground was soft as skin. Then I laid the husks down and began the lullaby I hate, the one that asks the earth to keep gently. The air thickened. The frogs in the ditch stopped croaking. Every sound folded in on itself. Then I heard the jar again. Tap, tap, tap. Louder this time, coming from under the mound. I got on my knees and dug. The soil was warm. An inch down, I found another jar. Not glass this time, clay, sealed with black wax, the kind old potters used for keeping oil. I brushed it clean. It hummed under my hands like a heart. I should have left it buried, but curiosity is a disease we're all born with. I cracked the wax with the edge of my knife. Inside were roots, thin, pale, shaped like fingers, and wrapped between them a small braid of dark hair tied with copper wire. The roots twitched when the air touched them. Then, from behind me, a voice said, "You shouldn't have come alone." I turned. No one. Just the scarecrow. Its shadow stretched longer than any light could make it. The lantern flickered. The wind changed. The shadow moved again. Slow, deliberate, bending until its head almost touched the ground. And then I realized there was no wind. The shadow wasn't swaying. It was kneeling, right over the circle I had drawn. The ground inside the circle began to sink. Not fast, not like collapse, like something beneath it was opening its mouth. The husks I'd laid down started to tremble, and from the crack between them came a small voice, A child's voice. "Grandpa, it's raining too much." I froze. That voice. It wasn't anyone alive. It was one of the names I'd heard whispered under the floorboards. One of the children lost decades ago. I stepped closer, heart pounding so loud it sounded like thunder trying to catch up. The husks shifted again. Something pale pushed through, small like a hand, made of root and skin at once, fingers curling as if reaching for help. When it touched the air, I smelled milk, not fresh milk, spoiled, sweet, wrong. The hand moved again, and from the mound came another voice, smaller, choking. "We kept the promise. Now keep yours." The ground heaved once, then went still. I stepped back, tripping over the lantern. The flame rolled out, hissing in the wet dirt. Darkness took everything. For a moment, the only light was from the scarecrow's buttons. 2 dull coins that caught just enough moonlight to look like eyes. They blinked. I don't remember running, but I remember the sound that chased me. Tap, tap, tap. It followed all the way home. When I reached my porch, the lantern glass was cracked and the rain had started again. Sharp, angry drops that slapped the roof like someone knocking too hard. Inside, the scraping under the floor had stopped. Instead, I heard something softer, breathing. I sat by the radio. It was off, but static hummed in its wires anyway, like the signal was coming from underground. Jacob, maybe you can hear it now, through your own broadcast. Maybe it's found your frequency too, because when I leaned close to listen, I swear the static whispered my name, and then in a child's voice, "Don't stop telling the story." The next day, the air itself felt swollen, heavy with water that wouldn't fall. The clouds crouched low like animals waiting for a signal. The ground beneath my porch had turned soft. It gave a little every time I stepped. People came by to ask if I'd gone to the mound. They didn't ask what I found. No one ever really wants an answer to that. They only wanted to know if the rain would stop. When I told them it wouldn't, they crossed themselves, even the ones who hadn't prayed in years, and backed away like I'd said something contagious. By evening, the water had risen past the steps. The fields shimmered like one huge dark mirror. I could see the scarecrow standing tall out there in the floodlight of the moon. Its new blue shirt rippled in the wind. Then I noticed something wrong with it. It wasn't nailed to the crossbeam anymore. It was standing. The legs beneath the trousers bent at the knees. Slow, natural, too natural. I opened my window to call out, to ask who was there wearing that shirt, but the air was thick. It pressed back against my voice. A smell of mud and milk drifted in. Then the static came again, humming from the radio, even though the plug lay in the corner. "Tell it, Grandpa. Tell the rest." That was the same child's voice from the mound, the one that had asked for rain 60 years ago. So I told it. I spoke into the dark. I told it how the pact began, how Sarala said return, how the earth kept every promise we made, even when we forgot to keep ours. And with every word, the floodwater outside crept higher, licking at the window frames, carrying pieces of husk and straw. When I stopped, The radio crackled one last time. Then come back to us. The house shuddered. The floorboards bulged like a heartbeat. A single board split with a sharp crack, and from that crack came a small wet hand made of roots, reaching up toward me. The fingernails were corn silk. The smell of rain filled my mouth. I grabbed the lantern and stepped back, but my heel slipped. The floor was breathing. When I fell, I saw shapes in the walls, small silhouettes pressing outward from inside the wood. Children, dozens of them, their faces half bark, half skin, whispering behind the grain. We kept your seasons. We fed your fields. Now feed us. The lantern fell and broke. Darkness poured in. The hand on the floor clenched, pulling itself higher until a face rose beside it. Pale, empty eyes, mouth full of soil. It smiled like it remembered me. Grandpa. I tried to move, but the floor opened beneath me. Cold mud swallowed my legs, my chest, my breath. I felt teeth, not sharp ones, but the slow grinding of roots wrapping around my ribs, pulling me down. Above me, the house creaked. Below me, something whispered, "Return." And for the first time I understood. We'd never given the earth children. We'd given it names. And every name carried a soul that would grow back when the ground was ready to harvest. I woke up lying in the field, morning light soft and gray. My body was dry, clean, too clean, as if the earth had washed me and set me out to dry. The scarecrow was gone. In its place stood a figure in a blue shirt, skin the color of clay, eyes dull and familiar. He looked like me, younger, and when he smiled, soil spilled from his mouth. "The rains will come now," he said. "The pact is whole again." He turned and walked toward the ditch where old Nolan once buried those names, and as he went, the roots beneath the field shifted, quiet, content, alive.
Good midnight, night owls. That was Grandpa Joseph, or maybe it still is him. We tried reaching him after that recording, but no one in his village seems to remember a man by that name anymore. Only a scarecrow standing in the middle of a flooded field, wearing a blue shirt and a copper ring on one wrist. If you ever hear tapping beneath your floor, don't dig. Just listen. Because maybe the earth isn't angry, it's just hungry for the stories we buried too deep. This is RJ Jacob, signing off from Midnight FM. Sleep well, and may the ground stay quiet under your house tonight. Good midnight.